Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here and kick off
Yay.
season three.
So I'd love to jump right in. You had shared a defense workforce study, an aerospace and defense workforce study with me from 2022. Can you tell me about your takeaways from those statistics?
So I stumbled upon this study just in my day job being an aerospace and defense analyst. We get a lot of questions from companies and governments about talent in aerospace and defense and, like reinforcing the talent pipeline and strategies to retain top talent, all of that. So I stumbled upon this study and maybe I should not have been surprised, but what really the statistic that jarred me was that women make up about 25% of the aerospace and defense industry, which is, not great. And I guess when I think about it, I've seen that in the world around me and at conferences. That's pretty well reflected. But just to actually see it in print is, yeah, really jarring.
So, what does working in a male dominated industry like this feel to you day to day, socially, and especially at this intersection of business, technology, and policy, where you're putting on a lot of different hats, speaking to a lot of different people, and each of these people have different personalities, and no matter how you speak to them, you can't necessarily change how someone perceives you.
Mm,
That is on them, but there's definitely tips and tricks that we all sort of implement in how we hope to be perceived.
mm,
So
yeah.
this is a two-parter. What does it feel like, and how do you navigate interacting with all of these different personalities?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my experience, I've in many jobs I've held, I've been one of few women, if not the only woman. And it's interesting, it kind of snuck up on me. I don't think I realized it early on, in part because I was homeschooled, grew up with two big brothers, until I started public school in the fifth grade. And so I've always been pretty accustomed to being around guys and getting along just fine and not having it be a problem, thankfully, because I have awesome big brothers and have great relationships with both of them. And I remembered my first job after my undergrad, actually, both of my first jobs after my undergrad, I was very much like one of the only women around. And I didn't really think too hard about it because there were a bunch of cultural differences in those environments. I'm from Portland, Oregon originally, so very much West Coast laid back kind of person. And then I moved to New York City to pursue jobs in foreign policy. And then my first role, I was actually working at the United Nations for the government of Jordan. So I'm on the East Coast, but technically when I stepped into the office, I was in Jordanian territory. And almost all of the other employees were Jordanian. So there were layers of like cultural differences. So anyways, I remembered like that role and roles following, um the gender issue sort of snuck up on me because I wasn't raised in a way where I was thinking about it. I was always, my brothers were my peers and sometimes they annoyed me, but I didn't think about it in like gendered language. And that, of course, is a total privilege, right? That does speak to my own experience growing up and what it means to identify as like, or to be a cisgender individual moving through this world. And so, one day I do start realizing, oh, it's interesting. Like I do nice things around the office to make the office a better place for everybody that aren't really reflected in my reviews because they're not the type of common, or they are like more common invisible work. They're not the type of things that are only associated with my name. So early on I started realizing, oh, this is really interesting. Like I feel like some of my like male colleagues are getting more credit for things than I do because I'm naturally being drawn to these sort of invisible things, be it like mentoring younger people or connecting with people throughout the organization or literally like organizing books in a closet. um yeah, and so then I went to a graduate program in policy and Middle Eastern studies, and that was relatively gender equal. And now I'm in the space business world. And yeah, definitely not a lot of ladies around. And when we find each other, I feel like we all really like cling on to one another. I'm really lucky. The team I'm on now, we have really strong women leadership at both the international and the national level. So I'm on the aerospace and defense team. We're a part of advanced industries at McKinsey. And I think that really does set a tone for our team where as soon as I joined, I really didn't feel, any of the kind of things I've had in other experiences. So, sometimes I feel like there's a weird competition with male colleagues, or also just expectations about how you're going to behave. And some of that's generational. And it really gets exhausting. And this could be a whole other topic, is like, how do you dress in the workplace? And like, I think you want to be able to feel authentic, and that's super important. And I'm authentically like a femme person. But at times I felt, if I had a day where I was more girly, I stuck out a bit. And so, yeah. And then add on to one other layer on like the dressing in the office. I think women are like, especially young women, are like very underserved in that conversation. Like, I don't know if you've ever looked up like a how to dress business casual guide, or like a how to dress business formal guide, like, and they have like the options for the genders, and what they show for women is not it's oftentimes things you don't see in the store, or you've never worn it, or if you try it on, it's like a lot of suit jackets. You can tell like they took the kind that was originally designed for a man's body and then just kind of shrunk it, but still it doesn't fit you
Right.
Yeah. So that was something early on I also found really frustrating, was like, how do I even just blend in when I want to, if I feel like it.
Wow, yeah. And so thinking about those guides that you looked at, or reaching out to the women that you did find, or just gender minorities you found in these environments, what are the sort of resources you were able to access to pick and choose these battles of being a chameleon on some days, and then really just being as femme as possible on another day? So just deciding that you would do whatever you'd want. Who or what helped you through that specifically? And I'm hoping that your response will help the listener rethink what is around them, and maybe see the resources around them with a different perspective or a different lens. Because when folks feel really stuck, we might be looking at the same things, but hearing something, or hearing someone say like, oh, this is who I like leaned on, can really help shift that mindset to be like, okay, I'm gonna give this another chance. I'm gonna reach out again. I'm gonna ask for help again. Or I'm gonna look at this resource again. I'm gonna look at the guide again and see if it leads me to an Aritzia versus a G2000.
Yeah. Oh man, I wish I had like some foolproof guide. Personally, I kind of had to take some time to figure it out. So I hail from a low income background, so that was another whole layer in this, is I had never really dressed super professional. And so when I started trying to like put professional pieces together, they just felt super weird on my body. And I've always been a master of like mimicking people. I think because of the fact that I was homeschooled, and then one day I was in public school and I was like, I would really like to not be bullied. Like, how can I just blend in? And that's a great short-term survival strategy, but you can't do that forever, especially like, and companies shouldn't expect or want their employees to operate in that manner forever, because if you can't be your authentic self, at least within reason in your workplace, you're going to burn out. It's not going to be a good fit. You're not going to be able to focus on your work and deliver your best outputs. And so I remember, yeah, I had some like funny little outfits where like things just didn't fit me, and I like didn't know what size of suit to get. And so I got all these just giant suits. And eventually I just had to get rid of it. I got them at H&M, which that's the other thing is I think early on, like when you're a young professional, like don't feel pressure to spend a ton of money on your work clothes because you're a young professional and you're probably not making a lot of money yet. And also, if you're anything like me, you might need time to try different things out and see if they actually work for you. Which is why also like from a sustainability perspective, like check out a Goodwill or a thrift store or a vintage shop. Some of my favorite professional pieces are like my favorite suit jacket is a vintage suit jacket I got at Goodwill. So I would say like just try on a few things, like don't break the bank on it when you're older and maybe you've had a chance to get more comfortable in certain styles, then you can invest in something that would be like a long time piece. But yeah, man, I wish I didn't ever find a resource that I thought was like really great for, showing how to dress. And maybe that's just my own path and I needed to define it for myself. But if anybody out there has one, let me know. I'm still fine tuning it.
I find that fascinating because I remember being just struck by how wonderfully professional you did look, and that you knew exactly how to play the part. And when I met you in real life, I knew we're all doing a bit in a business school building. And I think it's so fascinating that you went through this trial and error experience, but that the piece that maybe I got was just the outcome of that. And I think you sharing all the layers is so helpful because I think it just like it lets the pressure out a bit for students who are stressed, because maybe when they like close their eyes and they think like, oh, like what would I look like, maybe they see someone like yourself as the after and they're in the before. And so sharing your journey is so helpful, and it just helps to like create that like compassion for any student like wondering like what that would be like. So thank you so much for sharing all the
Yeah.
bits and pieces, and I hope that this inspires them to take that trip to the Goodwill and look at that suit aisle.
Yeah, I wish I had pictures of some of my early work outfits in New York because they were honestly, they were so bad, some of them, but I just had to figure it out. And also, one other thing, there were sometimes I wore things that felt very unlike myself. I even still have some of these pieces, really, like really girly dresses.
Mhm.
And that also could be sort of a fun experience where I was like, I think it's healthy to sometimes feel like you're stepping into the office and
Mm.
you're doing a bit of a bit if you want that sense of separation. So
Mhm.
sometimes I would wear something that I was like, this is professional. This isn't really me, but I'm just going to be cosplaying Upper East Side girl today.
Mhm.
And, it can be really fun.
Mhm.
So I think it's so important to just take some of the stress out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I definitely cosplay anthropology mannequin some days at work.
Yes. I love that.
And a lot of those pieces, they are thrifted and they're these beautiful like printed garments. A lot of it reminds me of my Indian heritage, and I bring in that color into spaces where a lot of folks are wearing different organization t-shirts and cargo shorts. So that's
Yeah.
always interesting. But I love that. I would love to know about the phenomenon of preserving your own peace in spaces where you're few and outnumbered, because there is that sense of doing the mental gymnastics when you have to think about what to wear, how does it present, and there's so many more thoughts that we have to sort of go through, and sometimes that can take away from us doing the best work, especially when we're younger and we're still trying to figure it out. So, what does preserving your peace now look like?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I think it's looked different at different times of my professional life. Um, but right now, I might be able to think of something from earlier on down the road. But right now, what it really looks like is being really selective about um like when I need to speak up and like defend myself or assert myself in situations. And I think there's so much pressure on women and young professionals. They're like, don't have imposter syndrome. I'm like, okay, you fixed it. Thanks for telling, it's like, that's not actionable feedback. But there is something like, you kind of have to like decide, is this going to be the thing that if I don't, step up and make it clear that I know what I'm talking about, then on some level, I am going to shrink back and feel like I'm not a real expert, or I don't know what I'm talking about. But that being said, I've also learned like, you can't be firing like at 100 all of the time. You can't constantly be walking, or at least for me, I don't have the energy to constantly walk through the world assuming that everybody has the worst intentions, assuming that everybody thinks that I'm less than. I really prefer to prove myself and my worth to, people that I really admire and I want to be like, and also people who I trust are going to listen and respond to that. And so sometimes that's like, there's like a senior person and maybe they had like feedback on my work and I want to clarify something and be like, oh, I appreciate that feedback. Thank you. I also want you to know I did take that into consideration. I left that out of this model or report for XYZ reasons, right? Like that's a really good interaction. I made it clear I know what I'm talking about. That builds trust between us. And I'm willing to do that. Then there's all these people in the world where I'm like, maybe they assume I'm dumb because I'm a woman, or I don't quite know what I'm talking about because I didn't go to an Ivy school, or all, there are people like that out there, which does blow my mind. I just don't really see the need to engage with them and like burn my energy trying to prove myself to somebody who from the jump decided I was less than, especially if I don't stand to gain anything from it. And then one other sort of protecting my peace bucket relates more to helping create the culture in my industry, like in my company, in my industry, that I want to see endure. And so that can, for me, a lot of times I'm thinking about like, okay, how can I help create spaces that are more welcoming to women like the woman I was when I started like 6 years ago, low income background from a different part of the country, just carried myself very different, always super quirky. And like that, ultimately I've used to learn that to my benefit. But early on in New York, I figured out like New Yorkers, they don't really want you to make sound effects when you're in the office. So I had to kind of get that out of my vocabulary. But, I try to think like, how can I help create spaces for women like the one I was that are more welcoming and encourage women to speak up. And again, you got to protect your peace. Like I can't fight every battle. But there's been a few instances. In fact, I had one recently where somebody did something in a space that I didn't think was quite right. Maybe it was just a microaggression or gatekeeping, or a way of like setting just a bad tone. And so I try to think about my relationship to that person, also the severity. Like if you just say something bigoted, I'm definitely gonna like call you out. But if it's something that's like, ooh, that could have been handled better, but maybe I don't know them. Maybe I do know them and I know they're not receptive to feedback. And if I say anything, it's going to just be burning my energy. They're not going to hear it, oil and water. And then this third bucket is, okay, that was something I don't think it was quite appropriate or quite right, but I know this person and I think they probably had good intentions and they maybe would want me to let them know how I perceived that so that I could spare them that in the future. And then that could also perhaps be me helping create positive change. I had this happen at a space event recently where I was seated near a guy friend from the industry, and we were having like speakers come to the table to meet all of the young professionals, and he was super excited. And every time somebody sat down, he spoke first and did it again and again. And I didn't mind. I didn't have anything to say, but there were two other women at the table who were much more quiet than me, and who that moment when you're waiting to see if you can speak, like, and women do that a lot, where they're like, okay, I'm gonna make sure I'm not interrupting anyone. And so they were doing that. He was not. And it happened a few times. So, and I was like, I know this person. I don't think that was intentional. So I just mentioned it casually. and he was grateful for it. I think he said he was. I think it was genuine. Um, so yeah, that's one way of like protecting my peace, like really picking my battles based on the person, because it's really draining to confront people sometimes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I would love your advice for both my younger self and just me now in navigating corporate in terms of the folks who to you feel like oil and water
Mhm.
and are not being microaggressive, they're being aggressive. So bullies who think they can be bullies because that is how it is. So it's as if in Hidden Figures, if they didn't, create a different bathroom, it's if they fought back. It's if the establishment fought back and said, no, you're actually going to have to use the bathroom way over there. So there's spaces like that I've encountered in school. And something I've learned recently is when you encounter those people in conferences or through different encounters at work, it's because you encountered that archetype at school. It's the pipeline. So I think a part of me had thought, oh, it's possible to maybe choose spaces that wouldn't have that archetype. And I'm learning that maybe that's not possible. Maybe the answer is that you need to learn how to handle that. And there's so many recent studies about how remote work has allowed gender minorities to just focus on their work because it's removed the workplace bully from your physical parameters. So you feel inherently safer. And that is such a gift. But there's certain instances where I feel as though learning how to handle that is going to teach you how to deal with bullies from other organizations or other just walks of life when you interact with them as you just expand and grow in your role and become the highest
Mhm.
version of you and in the biggest potential. So what sort of advice would you give to Alyssa who had their first job and in a hypothetical situation encountered a workplace bully who didn't think they were being a bully because they thought, no, in this homogeneously dominated space, this is okay. What happens then? What happens when you know that it's not okay, when other people say it's not okay too? And you sort of have to, politely let them know, but you also have to make peace with it. There's so many stages to that.
Mhm.
I was just curious what your thoughts were on something like that because I know it's going to come up for so many people who join the workforce where, they've dotted all their I's, maybe they have like the best grades, whatever, they're in the job.
Mhm.
And then the environment isn't reflective of the excitement that they have for the job. Like they're fabulous, but
Mhm.
the environment isn't fabulous. Like
Right.
what happens then?
Oh man, such a good question. I have never been good with bullies because I like my biggest bullies growing up were my brothers, and your siblings are always your bullies, and that wasn't real bullying. Then I go to public school. The first person who tried to bully me in public school is actually now a dear friend because it was hilarious. I think she was making fun of my shoes or something. And there was a pop culture reference involved in her diss. And I was so in my own little like bubble, it didn't even register. So I didn't even pick up on her bullying me. And she realized she was like, aiming at a really innocent target and took me under her wing. And then, zoom forward years later, and I'm in different professional settings where the stakes are high and people worked really hard to get there. And it's a lot of kids and a lot of men from really fancy schools. Um, and I didn't know what to do. Like, I hated this idea of like, you got to be tough. Like, I thought about every sassy woman character I'd seen on TV, and I was like, maybe I just memorize like little quips and I use them at devastating times. And I even tried that. I had one job, it was my first day. Um, and I got kind of a bad vibe from a guy who was on my team. And at one point there was like a discussion of about like getting coffee, like there was a coffee maker in the office, and I didn't know how to use it. And a woman who also worked in the office asked this guy, "Can you go help Alyssa learn how to use the machine?" And then he says, "Yeah, or she could just go buy coffee for all of us." And which I felt was a little aggressive, but it did not warrant my response at all. I said, "Oh, I would, but I'm not a bleeping intern." And in retrospect, it's kind of funny I said that, but that is so not my style. That's not professional. Like, you can't talk like that in an office. And that was my first day. And I'm just, in retrospect, I'm really glad my boss wasn't in the room when I did that. And I just felt gross about it after the fact. Like, I was like, ew, like, that's not how I carry myself. Like, just because he wants to act that way doesn't mean I need to stoop to his level. Um, and so for me, it's been a process of honestly figuring out my style, just like I did with like professional workwear. Like, I tested that out. I really did not enjoy it. And I've kind of realized since that for me, it's a balance of like, if someone were to make a comment like that to me now, I wouldn't use a swear word. I'd probably say something similar. Also, like, no hate towards interns. That's the other reason. Like, I hated that reply. As I was like, why am I acting like I'm better than interns? And like, I'm reinforcing this whole like hierarchical, like, ugh. Um, and so now I guess I've just learned like there's a pretty good balance of like ignoring it as long as it's not like out of bounds, and just being assertive with, for me at least, this is my style, being really assertive with my knowledge and my expertise until it's clear that like, all right, you're trying to establish like an aggressive bully culture, whatever. I'm leaving that to you. I'm not stooping to your level. But while you're busy wasting your energy on that, like, I'm actually going to be focusing on my job. I'm going to be speaking up, like presenting well in meetings. And sometimes you do, like, a lot of men still talk over women and gender minorities. And I don't like that. I don't want to, again, I try really hard not to stoop to the level of people whose behavior I don't endorse. But recently I've accepted sometimes I just gotta, someone starts talking over me, I just have to start talking right back over them. And not a sustainable strategy, right? Like, but if I'm entering a workplace and they have not established a culture that is not the norm, I don't have the energy beyond like my day-to-day job to like, tear that to the ground and like rebuild an entire, that's something that like really belongs at the hands of like the people leading an organization. And all of us can help enforce those norms, but again, it's like you have to be able to survive in your day-to-day. So that was super long-winded, but yeah, I think it's about finding ways to like stand up for yourself when it really matters. Like, definitely like plagiarizing, like that's like a hard line for me. If I feel like somebody copied my work and is taking credit for it, I will always bring that to somebody's attention. So like, sort of prioritizing what matters to you most, and doing it in a way that feels authentic to the kind of person you are and the values that you abide by.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything that you shared was just really validating and healing, because I think as you go through those encounters, it's tough as a new person. You don't know which part of the layered identity they're attacking. Like, what
Mhm.
makes it okay for them to do this? Because
Yeah.
they're clearly doing it because they think it is okay. So you don't know what exactly they see that makes it that way. And it's fascinating because I think the way that I've learned to handle it is by asking the people in charge whether that is the environment that they want and are creating, as a rhetorical question. So I asked the question, this happened to me. Is this normal? Is this something that you've encountered? Is this how your team is?
That's so powerful.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
And
borrow that.
yes, please do. And it's fascinating because I think that like the rhetorical aspect of it makes them sit there and question it. Like, is this okay? like, do you think that's okay? Is this normal? I'm new here.
Thank you for doing that and going out of your way to have those hard conversations.
Thank
Like
you.
easier said than done.
So, I'd love to chat about patterns of behavior, which is one of the final topics you've so generously offered. And you mentioned that you had a injury and you've been healing through hot yoga. Can you speak more on that?
Yeah, I'd love to. So yeah, and it's funny, I forgot that I sent you like the language about patterns. I tore my calf muscle running in high school. So it's so funny. I keep coming back to like my homeschooled identity, but it is like it's been a big part of my professional story because in some ways it gave me a lot of advantages. I did have like a great education at home and great relationship with my family. And in other ways, then I went into the world and I felt like I was operating from like kind of a different angle than a lot of people. So sports was something that got caught up in this kind of like scary space for me. I remember the first day of PE in public school, and it was truly the most horrifying thing. And also like my sweet mother had bought me underwear that went up to my like waistline, like where now actually we all have pants that go up there, but this was like 2004. And she didn't mean to buy them. And I had tried to roll them. Like, this is such an embarrassing story, but again, vulnerability time. First day of PE, we had gym shorts. I tried to roll them down underneath my gym shorts and they hung out over the top. And I remember this kid named DJ Throckmorton yelling, "Oh my God, ew, what is that? Is she wearing a diaper?" And it was just, and so ever since then, like anything I associate with PE class was just so stressful. And like it was like this unattainable thing for me. I couldn't climb the rope. I couldn't run fast. You tried to get me to kick the ball. I kicked myself. Like it was such a bad experience. And yeah. And so when I started in high school at one point, I joined the cross country team because I was like, it's an individual sport. I can't mess it up that much. But because of this sort of pedestal, I think I put a lot of physical activities on. Because growing up, I was active and playing and like climbing trees, but my family we didn't do any team sports. And so because I put it on this pedestal, I didn't really know how to do physical exercise in like a safe or sustainable way. And then I continued over the years following to elevate it and be like, oh no, like I can get better at this. Like this is just like something in my head, and like successful people run. And so I have to run. And so I start running. I'm bad at it. I'm just slow. I'm not meant to move quickly. But I couldn't accept that. And that was all tied up in all of these ideas about identity and me trying to prove that I was somebody else. And so tore my calf muscle once running in high school, take a season off, start running again, tear it again. Or at least strain it again or something. And then I go to college and I'm running and I tear it again. And it's like every time you tear a calf muscle, there's more scar tissue. So it's just easier to tear it. And so then for years, like I would go through these periods of like running a little bit, slowing it down, like it, because I would start to hurt, maybe not tear it again, but I wouldn't be doing well. And then zoom forward, I finished graduate school in Austin, Texas. I get this job at McKinsey. I moved to Boston to start the job, and I'm doing a HIIT class, another form of physical exercise that I hate. Why am I jumping on boxes? It works for some people, but for me, I'm like, I'm not, why am I flipping a tire? Like this, anyways. So, but I do it because it was caught up in this idea of like what successful, healthy people do. And I tore my calf muscle again. So this is last June. And at this point, I'm like wondering how much tissue is even left there. And I just accepted. I was like, and I just moved into a fourth floor walk up. I moved to this new city by myself. I had only like a couple of my space industry friends out here and really didn't know anybody. And I couldn't even really go out because I'd injured myself in the crutches. So anyways, I had a lot of time for self-reflection on my couch. And I just realized like why I've been spending so long, like this is a pattern for me. I've done this like 3 or 4 times. And there's gotta be like a deeper reason. And it's just that I had associated running, it was almost like a status symbol to me. Um, so once I started healing up, I committed to exploring other forms of physical exercise, and just like presence that would check that box for me, maybe without this whole identity fueled rationale. And I tried a bunch of different things throughout Boston, and I did my first hot yoga class thinking it was going to be really easy, and it was not. But for the first time in years, I felt like, parts of my body, because that kind of injury just has ripple effects. I felt parts of my body that had been affected in a secondary way sort of like moving into the right place, or like loosening up at least. And so that was kind of it for me. I've just gotten super into it for the last like 6 months, and it's been a great way to build community out here in Boston, and it's sustainable. And that's the coolest part, is that I don't keep hurting myself and having to take time off or anything like that. And there's just like a greater level of meaning to it for me as well. Like it's, meditative, it's quiet. I really protect my hot yoga time. My team knows a lot of times, like I do it right in the middle of the day. And I block my calendar. And even if I'm in the middle of a really, really busy project, I stop working, I go offline, I do it, because it's probably the only thing in my life I have very healthy boundaries about. And so that's great. I think enforcing boundaries, it's like a muscle. And I'm hoping that now that I've learned to do it with like this one thing, maybe I'm going to find more ways to turn off my work phone, and other boundary things like that. So.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for that story. That really took me on a ride straight from the PE story. And I just want to share how, again, I like just totally am in the trenches with you. And I feel so similarly about certain things as being these status symbols that you aspire to, especially for me. I really believe we can evolve and just pick any identity and become, but there are limitations that you might have to accept, and just general ways of being, likes and dislikes that you just can't change because that's who you are. It's like coded into you. And I love that the story had this like wonderful, sustainable, healthy, happy ending. And what a gift it is to people hearing this that you have these boundaries, especially in an environment that is technically challenging, and it you can just spend so many hours getting lost in technical documents and trying to pull out the policy or the business case or whatever document you're working on then. So for you to just like shut off and go, that is like exactly the sort of messaging I look to give folks on the podcast. So thank you so much for sharing that. That is so special.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so happy. I wish I would have listened to your podcast sooner, because that truly like did not, I've never been able to do that before. And I think it's really just about finding something that fits your goals and makes you happy. And like, there's a great article I read a couple years ago from the New York Times about like how to make different wellness habits sustainable, and a lot of it has to do with friction. So any like barrier to achieving if your wellness bucket you're trying to check is a workout, for example, well, do you have to drive to your gym? Would you go more often if you could walk there? Any little thing like that. And for me, I found a studio in my neighborhood, and I just buckled down. But I've never been able to do that before in my life. So I'm so happy there's people like you encouraging other folks to do that, because it's been so healthy for me. And I just can imagine for young professionals, like how far it could help them soar.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think like when I asked before on how something feels, I think for me, I just sense this really huge somatic shift in what it it like physically felt like when I carried all of this without having these avenues to release it. And there were
Mm.
so many like layered identities and issues and challenges and failures, and just the whole concoction was just, it was a lot. And so to have these practices, it's shifted how I like have felt. So
So
all of this
beautiful.
helps. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would love to jump into the rapid fire round.
Yeah.
If you
Ooh,
need a moment for any of them, that's also fine. It doesn't have to be that rapid.
okay. I
All
like
right.
the challenge.
Okay. So my first question is, what does wellness mean to you?
I should have thought about these a little bit more. Wellness to me means like a healthy balance of mental stimulation and physical peace.
I love that.
I've never, yep, that's a new thing I just said, but I think I believe it.
What does effective leadership mean to you?
I think effective leadership means having a vision that is so clear and commonly shared that you can push alongside your team rather than in front. Yeah, so like having a transparency around goals, and a sense of like this is like a common thing that we're working towards rather than I'm telling you this and you're following me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Yeah, I love that. Do you have a morning and or night routine? And what helps you bounce back when you fall off track?
Ooh, I love this last question because I am so off track right now. I'm actually I'm working on bouncing back. I've been supporting a lot of projects in Europe and the Middle East right now, but I've been supporting them from Boston. So my morning for a long time was me rolling out of bed and inhaling a coffee and getting to my desk. Um, so now that I'm back on less European projects, to get back into it because I completely lost my ability to wake up and sit and not work right away. I have been forcing myself to go and sit in this little like window nook I have and read fiction for 30 minutes with my coffee. And that's really been helping me because it's become sort of sacred. And of course I can't always do it, but it's really been helping me like start my day on a better tone. And then my nighttime routine, I don't have a super clear one, but I do put on like 5 different skincare products. And that is a really lovely routine for me. And I have a little like roller. So taking some time to love on my skin before bed.
Oh, I love that. Do you have any recommendations for things that you found now works for you after some trial and error?
Oh man, I wish I have some friends who are so advanced in skincare. It's a bit much for me. I don't like any skincare aisle I've ever been in. I mean, like all of the products super overwhelming. I only use the Ordinary, and this is not sponsored by Ordinary, but I only use them because they're very straightforward products. And I do like a hyaluronic acid, a vitamin C serum, retinol, and then some moisturizers that I don't know the name of them, or I do, but I'm a little dyslexic and there's a lot of syllables in them. So I'll spare you.
I love that. Yeah, I also love The Ordinary. I recently realized that, so I was using their retinol and squalane at night,
Uh-huh.
and I realized that it may have been it, it may not have been, but I kept breaking out after using that one,
Interesting.
which makes me really sad because I really
Yeah.
want to use their retinol, and maybe I need to use it without squalane. I'm not quite sure, but
Yeah.
figure that out.
I use their squalene cleanser. I've never said that word out loud before.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I think I also use the retinol and squalene.
Uh-huh.
So that could be an allergy, but retinol is intense too.
It is.
Yeah,
Maybe I was
I
using too much.
could be.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, if you figure it out, let me know. Or if you have
Yeah.
any skincare product recommendations, let me know. I love the Ordinary. I'm trying to diversify a
Mhm.
little bit though.
I love that. Yes. Okay, so I was wondering if there was anything else that you'd like to share, anything from any of the topics above or anything else.
I don't know, just that like being a young professional is hard. Being a young professional from a different background than the other people around you is extra hard. But everybody's going through stuff. And I think, and I meant to say this earlier with the bullying topic, I think like a huge key to success is like finding like-minded people in your space, maybe in your job, but if they're not there, then in your industry, like you and I, and just talking about it. Like there's so much power that comes from obviously solidarity, but having somebody affirm that your problems and your feelings are real and they're shared with other people. So yeah, I think that's it. Like there's a lot of people out there who want to help and are having the same struggles.
I love that. Thank you so much for reiterating that. And how can the audience members best reach you, follow you, or continue to learn from you? Is that through LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn is great. I recently did turn off the notifications on LinkedIn on my phone in an
Perfect.
effort to protect my peace.
Yes.
But I do check it. I also, for folks in the Boston area, we have a Boston, I co-founded the Boston Space Network. It's a monthly happy hour for space lovers in the area. And we have a WhatsApp group. And generally, I'm more responsive on WhatsApp than LinkedIn or email or any of those things. I'm also a big lover of space Twitter. So I have a space Twitter account. It's my first name or no, sorry, last name, first name. Yeah, if folks have any questions, I'm always down to try and support and help out best I can.
I love that. Well, I'm going to have all of that linked in the show notes. And I am so grateful for your time. Thank you so, so much
Oh,
in
thank
joining
you.
me.
This was so much fun.